Sorry, just a minute, Mr. Mayor. I am just double checking that the streaming is actually on. It looks like it's a little bit delayed, so if you could just bear with me one more minute. Hey, Craig. So it shows that we're streaming here, and it shows me that we should be streaming here. But when I'm on our YouTube channel, we're not streaming. And our people at home are telling me they're not seeing. Let me try again. Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Sorry for that delay. It is 5:56 and we are live streaming. The meeting is yours, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I see that we have a quorum with council. So welcome council to this meeting and welcome members of the SLT and welcome all viewing members of the public. We apologize for starting this meeting somewhat late. Council had a closed session meeting from 5 to 5:30 that ran a little over late. But we're ready to start this one. Regular council meeting on September 7th, 2021. Madam Clerk, the approval of agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the agenda for the September 7th, 2021 regular meeting of council be adopted. Having said that, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion put forth, an amendment from Councillor Hahn, that the agenda be amended to add an item 14.1, notice of motion. I do have Councillor Hahn as moving that, and she would need a seconder.
Okay. And I see she has Councillor Kaur.
Councillor Kaur is seconding. I don't know if Councillor Hahn wishes to speak to that, or she'd rather I just call the vote.
Oh, just certainly call the vote. That's fine. Thanks.
Thank you. That vote would begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson. Oh, sorry, Councillor Olson, you're muted.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to call for any other amendments.
Is there any other amendments any council members wish to put forward at this time? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So I do have a motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that the agenda for the September 7th, 2021 regular meeting of council be adopted as amended. And this vote would also begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and that does carry, and that does bring you to the disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Thank you. After viewing tonight's agenda, is there any councillor that has a pecuniary interest or general nature thereof to declare? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have so noted. And Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to your next item on the agenda, which is agenda item number 4, and that's the COVID-19 pandemic update. And we do have CAO David Cribbs providing the update on behalf of himself and for the fire chief.
Okay, Mr. CAO, you have the floor.
I'm nowhere near as good a fire chief as the fire chief, so I'll read this out well, but don't expect me to go through a window. We're up a ladder. So good evening, council. Unfortunately, it's the only humor we're going to have on this topic tonight. The numbers are increasing, both in Pelham and across Niagara. Pelham, our total cases have been brought up to 632, and as of today, we have 15 active cases. Niagara Region has had 16,924, and they've had 13 new ones today for a total active of 245. And we Niagara suffered another death, bringing our total to 422. Ontario's had 570,778 total cases, of which 554,953 have resolved, and 9,553 people have died in this province. Province-wide, there are 113 people on ventilators and 295 all in the ICU. For a national case total of 1.5 million, of which 1,455,000 have been resolved, and 27,034 Canadians have died from COVID. Our case doubling time is down to 394. Our reproduction rate is 1.1. The positivity rate at which people are tested is 3.6%. Of the variants present in Niagara, 4,285 were the alpha, 3 for the beta, 16 for the gamma, and 109 for the delta. There are currently 7 active outbreaks in Niagara, and 438 have been resolved. For vaccinations, some reasonable news there. Niagara is up to 73%, which is 66,988 for first dose, and 66.7% of us have had a second dose. The reproduction rate throughout Ontario is green. We're in the red for new cases per 100,000 in population. We're in the red for new cases daily average. We're in the red for new cases unknown spread. Hospital admissions remain in the green, and positivity rate is into the red. Here in Pelham, the MCC vaccination clinic will be operating, it operated today, and then Wednesday and Friday this week. So tomorrow and Friday, a great opportunity to come out and get your shot. Appointments are no longer necessary. Pelham Town Hall open to the public today, as you may well know. Entrance for the public is through the parking lot or at the back of the building, as you prefer, the part that faces onto the band shell and Peace Park. And the majority of new cases, both in Pelham and in Niagara, are amongst the unvaccinated. So please get your shot. That is the update. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. CAO. Any questions from council on the report of the CAO? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. So we do have a motion put forward by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hahn.
Clerk, I think Councillor Wink does indeed have a question.
Oh, thank you.
Councillor Wink?
Yes, thank you. So a number of municipalities in Ontario and some in the Niagara region have policies with regard to staff vaccination and council declarations. Are we looking at doing that in Pelham?
So I was going to introduce this under the CAO, but
okay.
one mind, so and it's the same person talking to you, so it probably makes no material difference. I can tell you that the EOC has been watching that closely. We have started working on a policy. But we make no bones that we were waiting to see where Niagara Public Health and Niagara Region itself would land. So the region is heading towards a policy. They had a vote last Thursday night, as you may or may not be aware, on this topic, and the matter is to come back to council, but the staff have directions and are drafting a report that I would describe, in my words, not theirs, as requiring mandatory vaccinations with only limited exceptions for health and human rights grounds.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, now turn to the clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So this would be it resolved that Council received the COVID-19 update presentation from D. Cribbs, Chief Administrative Officer, for information. And this vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. That does carry. Back to you, Mr. Cribbs, if you have more that you wanted to say on your own presentation.
We know that the overwhelming majority of town staff are double vaccinated. Basically, we don't know this officially in a corporate sense. We know it because it's a relatively small workforce and people communicate with each other. Further, very clearly, vaccine passports are coming to Ontario and are coming to Pelham and Niagara. We have a few weeks yet there, and there is some challenge in interpretation, particularly with regards to the MCC and how that works and how one reads who needs to show a vaccine passport and who does not. So we're working on that. Pelham is not alone in not having landed on that question exactly. There are, I think every municipality in Ontario is struggling with that. And certainly we're looking forward, we're working with our colleagues at much larger municipalities with much larger legal departments in particular to sort of find an ideal or the appropriate interpretation of the regulations as drafted. We will not be surprised if there's some amendments to the regulations because there's some challenge and I think unintentionally they're coming up quickly. There may be some internal strife or contradictions between them. So we're looking at that and working on that. We will be in a position to say things in a much more definitive form to council and to the public at the next meeting. Frankly, this is moving quickly, and all I can assure you is that it's all hands on deck, and we're reading as much as we can and thinking about it and trying to find something that works for our buildings and our community while respecting the underlying premise of public health and safety first. So we are likely to see new rules, or we may well see new rules in place with respect to admission to our public facilities, depending on how a couple of things unfold with the vaccine passports. We are highly likely to end up with a mandatory vaccination policy for town staff to be able to perform their duties. But neither of those items are finalized at this point in time. And that's generally, those two items are where our focus is at the moment.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. CAO.
Oh, thank you. Unless there's any questions, I'll call for the vote. So this would also be put forward by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hahn, and be resolved that Council received the COVID-19 update presentation from D. Cribbs, Chief Administrative Officer, for information. And this vote begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to our next item on the agenda, and it's the report from Regional Councillor. And we do have Regional Councillor Houston here present, and she does have a presentation, and she may share her screen and begin as she wishes.
Okay. Ms. Houston, welcome to council tonight, and you have the floor.
Mayor Junkin, I'll just try to share my screen. Oh, I'm gonna stop. Sorry, guys. There we go. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Just a quick overview. Everyone's good. They can hear me, right?
Yep, you're coming in.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So just one, as touched on by CAO Cribbs, I'm just going to highlight our staff vaccination policy. I want to talk about our regional chairs youth advisory panel and also the regional incentive review that is currently taking place. So the first item, which was mentioned by David, was we did approve in our last council meeting, we gave staff direction to develop a regional-wide vaccination policy for staff. This will take place this month. And as you mentioned, with other vaccination policies, staff will be required to provide proof of vaccinations. unless they're exempted due to health or protected ground. And as you may have been aware, some of our staff, those that work in healthcare, childcare, or long-term care homes, had already been provincially mandated to be vaccinated. So this created a division of staff which would have been required to be vaccinated and a division of staff which wouldn't have been. And there was also significant debate around the need to prioritize safety, not only for staff who are coming to work, but for members of the public who need to interact with our staff in the public or from a customer service position. And we felt it was in everyone's best interest to have a consistent policy. So we did approve region-wide staff vaccination policy. And at the end of that meeting, we also endorsed a letter to the province regarding the need for a province-wide vaccination passport program. And as we know, the province has also already taken that on, and we're expecting that to be in place September 22nd. So moving on to the Regional Chairs Youth Advisory Panel, we did receive a delegation from the City of Niagara Falls Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee for a request to create a region youth advisory panel. The council was very much in favor of this and approved this with really without very much information. I mean, it proposed having representatives from all municipalities, including a regional councillor, to sit on the committee and to help inform the chair's office, but also council on interests and engage youth in conversation in terms of our political discourse at the municipal level, which I think is a great idea. So we're expecting that the recruitment process will start fairly quickly, and they're hoping to have their first meeting starting in October. So once I see that recruitment come out, I'm happy to share it with council, and hopefully we can all promote someone we know who may be perfect for this committee to potentially participate, because it would be definitely good for Pelham to have a youth engaged in this committee and participating in discussions. And then one of the larger things we've been debating about, which seems to have been for a couple months now, is the region has undertaken a development incentive review. Our current suite of development incentives was developed approximately 20 years ago. Things have obviously significantly changed since then. We did direct staff to review and develop revisions to the policy, which they've been doing since 2018. There will include some administrative changes to improve and streamline the process, but it's also incorporated significant input from both the public and municipal staff. It also represents one of our largest discretionary items in our budget, so it is an area of focus that we want to really make sure that we're careful in terms of our spending, because we're moving into yet another challenging budget process and budget year next year. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about this, because one of the main changes to the program was the new strategy aims at repurposing the incentive funding so that they align with 4 strategic pillars, being attaining greater supply of affordable housing, increasing employment, as well as brownfield remediation. And then there is some opportunity for investment in public spaces, and being the public realm. It was approved in our most recent committee of the whole with the stipulation of some members of council also wanted the SNP program added back into the what was being approved. When it came to council, it looked as though council had shifted and they wanted to somehow offer both programs simultaneously, in that some councillors didn't want to give up the old funding program, but councillors also wanted the new funding program. I actually was successful in getting a deferral back to committee of the whole pending more information, because we didn't have any information on what this now was going to cost council and how it was going to affect our levy for the upcoming budget. And you know, I would also hate for the whole package to fail based on it being missing potential items that some of the other councillors felt were important, which I heard may have had something to do with concern over downtown core development and incentives. You know, I think this shift towards affordable housing is really important, considering the housing supply issues, and certainly Pelham isn't immune from this. I know from just some of my community members that some of my seniors are downsizing out of Pelham because of the lack of housing available. And I've also known family members whose children are making first-time purchases, and they're also having to buy their first house outside of Pelham because of our housing challenges. So we're definitely not immune to the affordable housing issue, as I'm sure all of you are aware. And things have changed since in the past 20 years. So I think it's really important to make sure that this funding package is aligned with our current needs and the strategic needs of our community. And that's it. I kept it short and sweet, knowing I only had 10 minutes and there's a limit on your agenda pages. So I'll turn it over for questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Councillor. Great presentation. Any questions from councillors to councillor? I'll go ahead, Councillor Corr.
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor, to Diane, and thank you very much for your presentation. I know it's not part of your presentation, but what is the feeling about the airport situation? Of us not up or downloading or uploading the taking back our airport. Is there any talk about that?
Sure, Councillor Corr, thanks for putting me on the spot. You know, I will say, I think this is, we've talked about the airport issue before at council, and that was prior to COVID and the significant economic challenges that were put before us in terms of COVID. I think council recognizes the taking over the airports will incur, has a financial cost, even if there's a long-term interest in terms of maybe how it can improve our transportation plan. I know this council has endorsed the region perhaps not taking it over. I think all of that will come into the conversation about, you know, what potential movement is made on the airports. But I don't expect that this issue will become before this council in this term. I think that our current council will want this pushed off to the next term just because it has not emerged as a priority with all of the things that we've had to deal with in this term. We have our official plan we're trying to get through before the end of term. We're still dealing with really challenging budget. We want to keep the levy as low as we can. We've got, you know, these regional incentives. It's been very divisive over the last couple of months. So I don't see it as a priority of this council. So but again, recognize that I'm one voice, but I would be very surprised if regional council took this on in consideration of everything on our plate right now.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry that I put you on the spot, but thank you.
Okay.
Anytime.
Any other questions? Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to follow Mr. Corr's lead and go with the NPCA. The NPCA has sent the municipality several excellent reports. The one I've been looking at, mainly because of the cannery pond and all that's been going on about it, has to do with the NPCA Water Quality Monitoring Program Summary Report for 2020. One of the things I noted was that the related reports and appendices to the Board of Directors were authored by and prepared by and submitted by, but the electronic copy of the actual report has no, generally when I get a auditor's report, there's a page on the inside who authored it, who prepared it, and all that kind of stuff. I see nothing there. And the second question I have to you has to do with an item on page 12. It has to do with this statement: assessing the level of correlation among biological industries and water quality chemistry parameters from 2005-2013 in the Effingham tributary of the 12 Mile Creek. I'm surprised that the NPCA's report wouldn't have more up-to-date data on the 12 Mile Creek, considering the cannery pond and all the other items we've been discussing lately. And maybe that's just, they just didn't reference the latest data. Do you have any comments to make on those two items?
Well, I don't have specific information on those items, but you're always free to email me and I'm happy to follow up and try and get more specific information. I have had some comments or concerns from residents wanting to see, not auditors, there's another term for it, like having the work double checked, and I've sent that on, but there's also, this has come before the board before, we haven't, I guess, seen the need to have an audit on everything that is done because it has a cost attached to it. And we're trying to be, I guess, as nimble as we can with our budget. So I guess we have to strike a balance between, you know, having information that is readily available, but also having that double checking take place. If you maybe could email me the questions that you have, I'd be happy to follow up, Councillor Hildebrand, but I guess I don't have an answer immediately on those questions because I was not prepared to answer them.
No, sorry for the last minute questions there. I'm not looking for an auditor's report. Generally, when I see a financial report, I see who did it. And on the electronic copy, I didn't see that. And like I said, the data just seemed like old data, and I can't believe that the MPC doesn't have newer data. But those are just my comments, and I will email you those questions. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to bring it up in a future board meeting, Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Diana, Ms. Houston? Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Houston. I don't want to be throwing you under the figurative bus, but it's a question about the transit. They've been, you know, pushing us to participate in this regional on-demand transit, but now we may be forced into it by a triple majority, but yet Fort Erie is not participating in this. Do you know the reason why they're exempt?
No, I'm actually not on the Public Works Committee. I know Mayor Junkin is. I don't know if he has any further information on that, but I do know that, and I believe that transit came to the last council meeting to talk about changes they've made based on municipal feedback. So no, I don't have an answer on that. I mean, I could certainly find out more for you and follow up in an email if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the councillor? And Ms. Houston, you did quite fine thinking on your feet tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll let go at that, and I'll turn to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that the September 7th, 2021 report submitted by Regional Councillor Houston be received for information. And this vote begins with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our next item on the agenda, which is a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Wink, and it's be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. 1 SC 13/2021 Special Council meeting August 23rd, 2021, and regular council RC 13/2021 regular council August 23rd, 2021. Mr. Mayor, to you to call for any errors or omissions.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. After viewing the minutes mentioned by the clerk, any omissions or comments on these minutes? Not seeing any.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that we are now at item 7 on the agenda. As council is aware, council may lift an item from the consent agenda if they wish to amend the resolution presented. If councilors simply wish to comment, they are not required to lift. Members of council, if there are any items to lift, please do advise. I would just note that with respect to the consent agenda items, right now we are dealing with the newly submitted items under the September 7th agenda. The consent agenda, which was deferred from the August 23rd meeting, will be considered under item 11, unfinished business. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to see if there's anybody who wishes to lift any items.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any items to be lifted would be 8.1 and on, I believe, Madam Clerk. Any items to be listed? I see Councillor Core.
Yes, I'd like to lift 8.5.1.
Okay, thank you. Anybody, any other councillor? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. If anybody wanted just to generally speak on any of the matters, now would be the time. If not, I'll call the vote. Okay. This is put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Core. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the September 7th, 2021 council agenda be received and that recommendations contained in there be approved, save and accept item 8.51, which was lifted by Councillor Core. Through you, Mr. Mayor, this vote would begin with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Core.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would bring you to the items for separate consideration. And we do have item 8.5.1, and that's the Integrity Commissioner Review Report, IC 12626-0221. And the original motion is, be it resolved that council receive for information the Integrity Commissioner correspondence file IC-12626-0221. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Core.
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we defer this issue until we find until we know what the cost is, and also until we get further information from the Integrity Commissioner.
Madam Clerk. First, Mr. CAO, any comments on that, please?
Well, Your Worship, motions to defer take precedence over any other. Council is welcome to comment on reasons why it does or does not want to defer the item. Wearing my old clerk hat, the motion's proper and in order. You have every right to defer or not defer the item as you see fit.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to the clerk.
Thank you. I do agree with the CAO. I would be looking, however, for a seconder.
Is there a seconder? I see Councillor Stewart.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we do have the mover as Councillor Core with a seconder for Councillor Stewart, and that would be deferring this matter for consideration until the cost of this matter has been determined, until council has received more information from the Integrity Commissioner. Unless there is any other...
Madam Clerk, I better, I have to declare a conflict of interest on this.
Okay. I shall note this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this vote would begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Core.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings you to your next item on the agenda, which is item 10.1.1. And this is a councillor report from Councillor Stewart with respect to the fundraising achievement at the library. Councillor Stewart, to you.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I've just got some brief comments. I would like to take a few minutes to offer belated birthday wishes to one of our library staff, Nancy Ward. Along with that, I would like to commend her for completing the challenge she set for her 50th birthday. She did 2 runs, 50 for 50. August 14th, she ran 50 miles, followed by a 50-kilometer run the next day. That is such an amazing accomplishment, but it doesn't stop there. She set up this challenge for herself and turned it into a fundraiser for our library. This was all done on her own time and initiative. She has so far raised nearly $11,500 to be put toward new shelving for the library. I would ask that instead of just a round of applause to congratulate her, those of us who can, here and at home, please make a donation to this cause, either through Canada Helps or in person at either library branch. Happy birthday, congratulations, and great thanks to Nancy Ward.
Okay. Very energetic lady for sure, and raising money for an excellent cause. Thank you for bringing that to the council's attention and to the public's attention, Councillor. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that Council receive Councillor Stewart's verbal presentation with respect to Nancy Ward's fundraising achievement for the library for information. And this vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our next item on the agenda, and this is item 10.2.1, and I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2021-0151, Detailed Design Assignment for Pelham Street Reconstruction, Phase 3 and 4, and for Fenwick Road between Highway 20 and Tice Road, and that Council approve the award of the Pelham Street Reconstruction Detailed Design Engineering Assignment to Associated Engineering, Inc., AE, in the amount of $160,840 plus applicable taxes, and that Council approve the award of the Effingham Road Reconstruction Detailed Design Engineering Assignment to Carrie T. Howe Limited, KTH, in the amount of $53,570 plus applicable taxes, and that Council approve funding the budget shortfall from Public Works Project RD 16-21 and RD 18-21 from the Road Capital Reserve account in the amount of $29,410 plus applicable taxes. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, on this agenda item, is there discussions, questions? Councillor Hahn.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this would be to, I guess, well, whether the Director of Public Works or the Treasurer wants to answer. So with regards to that stretch that's on Effingham that's going to be used for the cycling for the Summer Games, are the Summer Games contributing to any of the costs associated with the engineering and or construction work?
Director of Public Works, perhaps?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, the Canada Summer Games is not directly contributing to the cost for the rehabilitation of that section of road.
Okay, thank you. Councillor?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. And this vote begins with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, your next item on the agenda is 10.2.2, and we have a motion put forth by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2021-0152, Corporate Services Modernization Grant Transfer Payments for approval, and that Council approve the 4 modernization grant transfer payment agreements along with the respective bylaws for the Mayor and Clerk's signature. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any discussion on this item or questions? No doubt these grants were begotten by our treasurer and her crew. Perhaps the treasurer would have something to say on this before we go to council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, these grants were brought forward to council for approval in a prior council meeting. This is an administrative requirement that we require the clerk and the mayor to sign off. There are 4 grants right now. One is for the review of the unionizing the libraries, the Pelham Library and the Lincoln Library, and that review is underway right now by the consultant. Another grant is for a corporate services review to review all of our processes and to look for ways of automation in order to minimize the manual work that's being done in certain areas of corporate services. And then we have another grant is for the to review human resources, to digitize human resources performance evaluation. Right now, everything is done in Word documents, and what this would do is it would provide a software, a recommendation for a software where all of the performance evaluations, tracking of staff, PD, and also the communication with their supervisors would all be stored in this software. So that's another grant for that. And then the other one is for a review to look at all of our web services, and this includes the public service request, the PSR system that we have, and to bring forward recommendations on how we can improve the customer experience with regards to the PSR system and other web services we have. For example, look at our cemetery and also in the clerk's department. So it's a review to review all of the web services and provide a better experience for the residents of the town, and also to provide better information for town staff.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Madam Treasurer. Any questions or comments on these grants? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt?
Yes.
Mayor Duncan?
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're on our next item of business, 10.2.3, and this is a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2021-0153, Clerk's Delegation of Powers and Duties, Administrative Authority Bylaw Update, and that Council consider the draft amendments to the Administrative Authority Bylaw to delegate additional authority to various municipal staff positions, and that the clerk be directed to present the bylaw for Council consideration at the next meeting. Through you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. On any questions, comments on this agenda item? I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. What I'd like to make is an amendment to Appendix A. And my amendment would be is that Council amend the proposed Appendix A, recommended additional delegation of powers, and discuss and vote on each schedule item separately, because I think each one of them deserves a discussion, and then we can vote on each one of them separately.
Okay, you'd need a seconder for that, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we would need a seconder for the motion.
And I see Councillor Kaur will second. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So as I do understand, the councillor wishes to go through the appendix per schedule. Was there a schedule that you wish to start with? Is it just starting with Schedule A and working through, Councillor Hildebrandt?
Starting at the top and working the way through.
Okay, thank you. So for Schedule A, that would be the Chief Administrative Officer. Did you wish for me to read into the record the delegated authorities, or did you have your proposed amendments in mind?
I don't have a proposed amendment in mind. I just want a discussion on the item in question, because I see that through you, Mr. Mayor, that the town clerk was involved, and we've had some discussion on these. So I'd like an explanation, the reason for these two changes, and an explanation for the amount requested.
Certainly, if it's okay with the CAO, if I may begin, as I think that I had suggested these. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The first request for delegated authority is with respect to leases and licenses. And the requested value was for not to exceed $50,000. And that was to give the Chief Administrative Officer and Town Clerk the authority to sign such leases and agreements. This came from some proposed leases that were provided by the federal government with respect to Elections Canada. As council is aware, we do have a federal election coming up, and the federal government wished to lease some property to run some advanced polls and election voting day. At the time, certainly we wanted to be able to sign these, but we would need council's authority to do that. So I thought this would be a good item to bring before council to seek some authority. As far as $50,000, I had just thrown that item out there, thinking that it was a fairly low amount of money, but certainly council could change that to a lower amount with respect to execution of agreements and amending agreements for the acquisition of goods and services or other town activities, works or services that are ordinary to the business of the town, not to exceed $50,000. This came up because the region did have a data share agreement that they wished for us to execute. And again, we don't have the authority to execute that without bringing to council. That is on your agenda for tonight. And I thought that would be another good example of a type of an agreement that perhaps staff would be able to execute, as it's a normal course of business type of agreement that we would want to enter into. And that's where those two items came from, unless the CAO has other comments to add.
Mr. CAO, any further comments?
I think that canvasses it well. Our agendas are long when we don't have delegated authority for items that are small enough that they're not statistically significant variances in budgets. We don't want to clog up council agenda time with discussing items that are $3,000 or a $25 million corporation. So those are, but certainly council can pick any number it's comfortable with. It need not be 50.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. On the first one about the leases and licenses, can we amend that so that it only deals with the federal election at this time, and then possibly defer, an overall structuring of that for later?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly council can make any amendments that they wish. If council wanted to scope it down to elections, might I suggest it would be for elections in general, and that would also allow for the provincial government, the federal, and for myself to enter into agreements with respect to the upcoming municipal election.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I see Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO. What's the difference between what you're proposing or a lame duck council? Because when I reviewed it, it's the same thing almost. So we're going to be in a lame duck council. I understand if it comes in June or so, what would be the difference? It's exactly the same.
Well, to answer Councillor Corr, that might be the inspiration for the language. Sometime next year, there will be a report on a public agenda asking for delegation of authority if council enters into what we colloquially refer to as lame duck status. So we'll write that report next year, standard of fare in fourth year of a 4-year cycle. This item before you today is a presumably permanent delegation of authority for minor contracts. I would submit to you, council, that if you're uncomfortable with 50,000, keeping in mind for a number of items, the Office of the CAO already has that signing authority. We put this in here for clarity because we don't have anything that specifically says vis-a-vis leases, but my office is I'm already able to sign in all sorts of cases, $40,000 items. So, but that being said, you should only delegate authority for things with which you're comfortable, and you should maintain responsibility for all other items. So if 50,000 is too high an item on a lease, vary it to 20 or 15, 10. Whatever hits your comfort level is the correct answer. And beyond that, there is no right answer. You don't technically have to delegate this authority at all, but if you don't, we're going to come back next year on a $3,000 item, $4,000, $2,000 item for the provincial election. And it's just going to be one more very minor report where we wouldn't normally. Keep in mind, the real problem isn't that we would continue to tell you things were happening. We'd write information reports. But when we don't get to them, if they get deferred or not dealt with, then we don't enter the contract at all. That's the real danger with not having the delegated authority. So it's not like the information wouldn't be made public, but for relatively minor items, it is fairly common to give some amount of delegated authority. And the dollar value of the contract is probably a good way for you to exercise control. It tends to stand in place of the sophistication of the agreement, I would submit.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. We just had a little technical problem here. There we go. Excellent. Councillor Corr, any more on that question?
Just to follow up, and the reason I mentioned, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO, the reason I mentioned it, it's the same amount that the last time the town of Pelham went to a lame duck, it was 50,000. That's all.
No, it's not coincidental. That's good statutory language. But we're not married to 50,000, and if that's uncomfortable for council, please amend.
Okay. Councillor Hildebrand?
Mr. Mayor, to the clerk, when you're talking about leases for the election and you're talking about the data for the region, what kind of budget number are you talking?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, for the federal leases, I believe Ms. Quinlan indicated it was around $3,700. I think was the value of those leases.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they're the leases of the 2 fire stations and the Meridian Community Center. One was for $400, one was for $500, and one was for $1,200. So they're just minimal. They're very small leases. And just think of the situation we have now, an election in 36 days since it was called, that they want this information back as quickly as possible in order for them to be able to secure the venue. So we just need that leeway for these very small leases for us to sign these leases and then give the information back to the provincial or federal government.
Thank you for that, Madam Treasurer. Yes, Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you, I feel very comfortable with a $10,000 allowance on these 2 items. That would be my proposal.
Okay, thank you. I see some Neds nodding. Any other comments on that figure, or on a new figure to put forward? Mr. CAO, any comments on that?
The correct answer is whatever council is comfortable with.
Okay, thank
We're
you.
happy to receive.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, does that be an amendment?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to confirm with Councillor Stewart that she would be agreeable to the 10,000. I know she had suggested just with respect to elections, but is she agreeable to the 10,000?
Yes, that works fine.
Okay, so I would keep the mover as Councillor Hildebrand and the seconder as Councillor Corr, and that would be for Schedule A, and that would be to amend the amount in both cases to $10,000. Unless there's any further discussion?
Any further discussion? Not seeing it, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This would begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Corr.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just ask, did council wish to discuss Schedule B, which is for the town clerk?
Is there any discussion for Schedule B, the town clerk? If not, we'll just we'll take that as it is.
Okay, thank you. Schedule C is for the Director of Corporate Services, Treasurer.
Any discussion on Schedule C? Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the treasurer. What dollar figure are we looking at? Are we looking at transferring millions of dollars? You didn't put a number to this.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I wish I could transfer millions of dollars to the reserves. That would be a wonderful situation to be in. Just to give you a little bit of a background, as you recall last year, and don't forget this year as well, we are working with Safe Restart grants. And one of the strategies that we did last year was to move any of the surplus funds that were in our budgets to the reserves in order for us to truly reflect what the cost of COVID was and what the savings that the town staff were able to do should go to the reserves. So the only thing there isn't a dollar amount, Councillor Cora, but it's not a lot of money. What it is looking at the approved budget that council has approved, and if we have any savings in particular lines. So, for example, if we're in the roads budget and there are savings in there from the roads budget, we would move it to the roads reserve. So the reserve transfers only pertain to the specific reserves that actually meet the qualifications for that transfer. All transfer out of the reserves, that requires council approval. But we're putting money in the reserves. And this is a strategic move that we do in order for us to maximize on grants as well. And it makes it easier for us to do this throughout near the end of the year, as opposed to waiting until May when we go to the audit committee after year end. It's sort of, backwards. Like our goal is always to put the money into the reserves and then receive approval afterwards. Just like right now, the last motion that we had to transfer $29,000 out of the roads reserve, that requires council approval. So it just helps us with grants and just helps us with the year-end process. But we always provide a report to council on what was transferred to the reserves as well at year-end.
Councillor Cora?
I appreciate your answer, and what I was scared of, and you answered it, there will be no time that money will be taken out of reserve unless our approval.
Yes.
Or the audit committee also. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct, but it has to be council's approval. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we could transfer
in, but not out. So
okay,
council's approval to transfer out only happens at budget time, or what happened right now, a special request like we did for the 29,000 with the Director of Public Works request. Yes,
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions on Schedule C we're on? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. That does bring us to Schedule D, and that's for the Director of Community Planning and Development. If there's any comments?
Any questions or comments on Schedule D? Councillor Hildebrand?
Yeah, this schedule on planning and development is the area where I get all the residential comments and complaints and all the issues. And therefore, I think it should stay with council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any Councillor Cora?
Yes, I fully support Councillor Hildebrand's decision. I don't feel comfortable with this either. We're elected to make decisions, and these are the decisions we should be making.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Hahn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would agree. I think that is an area that I'd feel more comfortable with council making those decisions.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. So this would be, what I'm hearing is a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Cora, and it would be to strike the proposed suggestions in Schedule D.
Any other discussion on this motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Unless the CAO has anything that he wished to speak to, or otherwise I'll just call the vote.
Is there?
Thank you. And that begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Cora.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
Thank you. And that does carry. Schedule E would be for the fire chief. He had no requested additions. Schedule F would be for the Director of Public Works. To council for their discussion.
Yes. So we're on on Schedule F, Director of Public Works. Any discussion, comments, questions on this schedule? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. For Schedule G, that was the Director of Recreation, Culture, and Wellness. She also had no recommendations. And for Schedule H was the Town Solicitor, and she made some recommendations with respect to some housekeeping cleanup items. So for an example, changing references to LPAT, the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and to include the term application with respect to commencing or defending litigation. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Any discussion on Schedule H with the Town Solicitor? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The Clerk's Department has noted these changes, and then that would be a motion, would be a revised, and it would be the motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2021-0153, Clerk's Delegation of Powers and Duties, Administrative Authority Bylaw Update, and that Council consider the draft amendments to the Administrative Authority Bylaw to delegate additional authority to various municipal staff positions, and that the Clerk be directed to present the bylaw for Council approval at the next regular meeting as amended. And that would include the amendments discussed tonight, unless there's any other discussion.
Any other discussion or questions on this item? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The vote here begins with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next item on the agenda, and we do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Wink. And it is, whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its final report on June 2nd, 2015, which includes 94 calls to action to readiness the legacy of the residential schools and advance the process of Canadian reconciliation. And whereas the recent discoveries of remains and unmarked graves across Canada have led to the increased call for all levels of government to address the recommendations in the RTC's call for action. And whereas all Canadians and all orders of government have a role to play in reconciliation, and whereas recommendation number 80 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission called upon by the federal government in collaboration with Aboriginal peoples to establish as a statutory holiday a National Day for Truth and Reconciliation to ensure that public commemoration of the history and legacy of residential schools remains a vital component of the reconciliation process. And whereas the federal government has announced September 30th, 2021 as the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, National Orange Shirt Day, and a federal statutory holiday. Be it resolved that Pelham Town Council receive Report 2021-0150 National Truth and Reconciliation Report for information. And be it resolved further that Pelham Town Council hereby commit to recognizing September 30th as the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, National Orange Shirt Day, in the town of Pelham, whereas focus shall be placed on sharing the stories of residential school survivors, their families, and communities. And be it further resolved that the town of Pelham raise the orange Every Child Matters flag with the appropriate ceremony when, where possible at town facilities to recognize the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation every year on September 30th. And be it further resolved that Council approve the one-time expenditure of up to $12,000 for education and training of town staff, volunteers, elected officials, and committee members on the history, legacy, and significance of the residential school system upon Canada's First Nation population, with funds to be taken from the Human Resources, Opportunities, and Contingencies Reserve. And be it further resolved that the town of Pelham, being commencing council of the whole, and committee of adjustment meetings with a land acknowledgement effective September 20th, 2021, and further that town hall be opened or closed on September 30th, 2021, and every year thereafter. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to you for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any discussion on these, on this motion, on this agenda item? quite a few things that, if we approve this item, come into effect. Any questions? See Councillor Councillor Wink.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a suggestion. I agree with the concept that the municipal offices close on September 30th, and agree with staff that the exception be to the MCC. I would also suggest that staff education and training be completed on that day. And I believe the report said that it's a 2-hour session that then the staff have the rest of the day to themselves.
Okay, thank you. I have asked Mr. CAO to comment on that.
Well, that would most certainly be an ideal. You'd want to do either ceremony and or education on the day in question. Our real challenge this year in 2021 is the sort of 11th hour nature of this undertaking. We feel we've identified 2 separate programs, both this one I believe directly run by the First Nations University in Saskatchewan, and the other, I don't know if it's from a think tank, but like associated there too, somehow. We're not confident we can guarantee access to those programs on that day when demand is extremely heavy. So certainly understand the appropriateness of that. We acknowledge the good symbolism. I'm just not 100% confident we can deliver on that this calendar year, which is why the report suggests however you choose to vote on the various items, assuming you're supportive of the education and the educational cost, we'd undertake that every staff member would be directed to complete the training before the end of the calendar year. So we ensure we all learn better relatively shortly, whatever that is, hopefully on the day in question. And then we should be better positioned to do better next year. It's the problem with a month of preparation and competing with a lot of other organizations for the same limited training resources.
Yes, so then to do the training of a couple hours, that would be in addition to, be done during staff working time.
Yes, that is essentially the part of the ask or the value, the demonstrated commitment. I think we're asking of the community.
Councillor Wink, is that?
No, that's fine, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Olson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO. Now, the reconciliation statement, is that advanced enough to prove it at this point?
Sorry, you mean the land acknowledgement, sir?
The land acknowledgement statement, I should say.
There are 2, from my perspective at least, and I'll only speak for myself, I think there are 2 very strong ones in Niagara. The region approved their new one, and we were a part of that. In fairness, you'll recall we joined the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities, I'm going to say a year ago, maybe a bit more than that. One of the projects that group, and our human resources staff member is Pelham's representative on the joint committee by several municipalities. I've been working on that for some time. The region approved it as appropriate for use in Niagara last week. So there's that example. And then Niagara College also has a well-researched, well-documented land acknowledgement. And both Niagara Region headquarters and Niagara College main campus are 10 kilometers from Town Hall, so north and south, roughly. So they both viewed as entirely appropriate for our uses and our purposes. So we have access to 2, and the benefit of the region is they've got different versions for different types of meetings, so they're different durations and different degrees of specificity, I suppose.
Councillor Olson?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and the effect on the collective agreement with our employees, is there any impact there?
No, Pelham's collective agreement does not include a provision requiring the employer to honor federal holidays.
But it does list them, though, the holidays.
It does list holidays, that is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hahn?
Through the mayor, I would agree with the initiatives that are proposed, with the exemption, although it may not be popular, is that it's a federal recognized holiday, not provincial. So so that last line, whether it be open or closed, I would be supportive of it being open.
Are you willing to put forward an amendment on that, Councillor?
Sure. Like I said, if it was a provincially recognized, then that's a completely different story. But this is federal. So when I look at, the organizations I work with, they're all at work. They're doing various initiatives. They're recognizing this in various ways, which is wholly appropriate. But that doesn't mean that all staff get the day off. If it was provincial, like I said, that would be different. But it's federal.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So did you put forward a motion, an amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
I would second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on this amendment? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to go back to the training program for one minute. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO. Is it $12,000 to cover staff time or just for access to the program you're recommending?
It's to cover fees. The actual the first quote we got was 11,000. Keeping in mind that there's now a week since we've written this report, it was the most accurate thing we had at the time we went to print. That didn't include town volunteers, people who sit on various committees, nor did it include yourselves in our sort of haste to find an appropriate number. So, which is why although the original quote's 11,000, the motion as drafted says 12,000 in hopes of being able to offer the greater Pelham family, if you will, the opportunity. But those are fees charged by the organizations in question.
Thank you so much. And in conclusion, I will support Councillor Hahn's motion with regards to keeping the municipal offices open.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I totally agree with the land acknowledgement. Since the time I've been on the library board, we start every one of our meetings with the land acknowledgement. And I don't believe we should close the town hall. We should raise the flag, and we can, seeing as our staff will be there working, we can declare September 30th Orange Shirt Day for, staffers at the town hall. Like, I know that we're only open on a limited basis now, but once we're more open and the staff will be more visible to the public, I think it would be a good idea to declare it Orange Shirt Day. And I suggest that the training should be completed by year's end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? I would just like to say that I will not be supporting Councillor Hahn's amendment. We were one of the few communities in the Niagara region that went ahead with our Canada Day celebrations. And in as respectful a way as we could. We flew the flag at half-mast, but bottom line is we did partake of the Canada Day celebrations. I'm glad we did. I think that this would be one small way to keep the offices closed to show our respect to the Indigenous community. So I won't be supporting this. Any other comments, questions? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So I do have the mover as Councillor Hahn with the seconder as Councillor Olson, and it's that the motion be amended to include the words open in the final paragraph, so indicating that Town Hall would remain open on September 30th. And for this vote, I would begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
Thank you, and that does carry. That does bring you to the original main motion as amended, and the amendment would be that the town hall remains open. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Yes. So on the amended motion, is there any other further comments or questions? Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO. So if it's a federal statutory holiday, that means all federal workers, banks, and anything related to the federal government will be off?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, would the Niagara, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO, would that mean also Niagara Region offices?
So that's a complicated question to answer. It's a fair question, and here's my convoluted answer. What we wrote in the report was correct at the time. Tonight, there are 3 other municipalities having a vote on this, on very similar reports that their chief administrative officers have written to their councils. So I can't tell you. I can tell you that there are 3 municipalities that have declared they're going to be closed. I can tell you there are a couple that have declared they're going to be open, and there are a whole bunch that are going to decide tonight. And there will not be consistency throughout Niagara, and that includes at the region. So it's very much hit or miss. Fort Erie will be closed. Port Colborne will be closed. I understand Niagara Falls will be open. They're providing their staff with a loo day. I believe St. Catharines is managing to run training on the day in question. They're bigger and able to contract better than we can. So they're working, but most of them are not available to the public. You see the split difference there. So I know Grimsby is as yet undecided. Waynfleet is as yet undecided. I believe West Lincoln is as yet undecided. I believe Welland is closing. So you get very different answers depending where you look at throughout Niagara. And unfortunately, our neighbors in that sense, depending on what answer you want to get to, you can find a neighboring inspiration.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. CEO. Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO. Could we all get together and make a consensus? Either we all do it or we don't. And
this seems like really appropriate January work to me. It really comes down to this 11th hour thing, and for some municipalities, collective agreement considerations, which I'm proud to say Pelham does not suffer from. But there's wild inconsistency in our region alone, and I think a lot of Canadians coast to coast are wrestling with the appropriate way to approach the day and the concept.
Okay. Any other question? Oh, any other questions or comments? Okay, not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So again, this is for the motion as amended, and this vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Corr.
yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
And that carries. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next item on our agenda is the unfinished business. We are now at item 11.2, which is the consent agenda, which took place on the August 23rd agenda. Through you, Mr. Mayor, if there are any items that councillors wish to lift.
Yeah, so first of all, any of the consent agendas for August 23rd of 2021. Is there anyone that wants to lift them, or and of course that's separate from if you just want to discuss it. I see Councillor Olson, you had your hand up to lift an item.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, I don't necessarily want to lift anything. I want to discuss some things.
Okay, thank you. Well, right now we're doing the anyone that wanted to lift an item. And do I see any? No, I do not, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it is a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt, and it's be it resolved that the consent agenda items deferred from August 23rd, 2021, as listed on the September 7th, 2021 council agenda be received, and the recommendations therein be approved as contained in. Through you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion on those items.
For discussion, so we go with Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the treasurer. Noting your report and knowing that you've submitted the statements and things to the audit and finance and audit committee for review. In your one paragraph, you make note how difficult it is to make predictions about the year end and what we're going to look like as far as our operating budgets. Does that also apply to our debt and reserve forecast, how difficult it is to predict where we're going to be? Because we haven't really managed to make the commitments to the reserves that we wanted over the past few years. And I just wondered what the outlook is on that is for this year, and the debt payments, and I'm assuming we can't go into any more debt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. With regards to the 2021 year-end results, the reserve transfers and the debt payments, we are definitely able to make them this year because it's budgeted. I think what you're referring to, Councillor Olson, is more of in the future when we're looking at maybe the 2022 budget onwards. That's what we discussed with the Finance and Audit Committee about the amount that we're actually transferring to the reserves in order to be able to address the capital needs. So that, I would say, is where the difficulty is, because we right now, we've received the first draft of the 2022 capital budgets, and the request that we're getting from the budget holders is the numbers are quite large in comparison to what the reserves are. So this is more of the 2022 budget. So for 2021, we definitely can, we will meet we have met the debt obligations, and we will make the right reserve transfers that were budgeted. Now, are they the right amount? Well, we always, as you know, from the reserve policy, we need more, but that's a different discussion. But we are definitely able to meet the requirements for 2021.
Councillor Olson?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. That's better said than my question. So next year looks like a more difficult year, and the end of the year, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to transfer as much as we have in the past, I gather.
No, so through you, Mr. Mayor, what we found this year, the difference between 2020 and 2021 is that we started 2020 with a very strong January, February, and half of March. Actually, the community center in those months of last year were opened, and actually they were above the revenue projections. They were doing very well, and that's what helped us in 2020, along with being open in the summer for 2 months for the ice rentals, to sort of meet the budget for the MCC. What happened in 2021 is that we were 5 months in a lockdown that the MCC has been closed, and that's what's causing the challenges for us as far as meeting the revenue targets. And we have to depend on the Safe Restart COVID grant to cover that. So that's where right now, it's September the 7th, and depending on what's happening, are we going to have a fourth wave? Is the MCC going to shut down? We don't know right now. So, what's been helpful is the additional funds that the province allocated to us, the $347,000 that wasn't budgeted. That definitely is going to help us at least get to the end of the year, and we hope that that's enough money.
Okay, thank you for that, Madam Treasurer. So what I want to do on these consent items, I think there's a lot that wants to be discussed. So I'm going to let each councillor, we're going to go down the list. Just a coincidence that Councillor Olson's was the 1.1. If I may, Council, I'd like to talk on 1.2. which is the MOTH program, Director of Public Works. It looks like it was a very successful program from the containment of the moth and keeping the canopy on what was sprayed intact. Does that, I believe that the money we allocated last year also calls for the inspection this fall of the an egg count. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, to answer the first part of the question, yes, the program was very successful in the areas that were sprayed. And from the studies that were completed after the spray was completed, it shows that defoliation numbers were as low as 5% on those trees that were sprayed. No more showed any more than 25%, which was a really good outcome. With respect to the surveys that will be completed in January of 2022, those will actually be included as part of the 2022 operating budget for the gypsy moth spray program.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. So let's, so anyone want to pull or discuss 2.13, information regarding Niagara Region's proposed elevated water tank? And I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I want to go back to item 11.2.1, the corporate report.
Yep, go ahead.
I've got 3 items on there. On the MCC monthly review, Appendix 3, I know these reports are received from the treasurer, just concluded at the end of January. Can the treasurer bring us up to date what the July and August revenues were for this year? Because we know last year we gained 188,000 in revenues, and I'm hoping there's an offset this year again from the 5 weeks we had of renting the MCC.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so these reports here are now until the end of June, so June 30th is the second quarter. Councillor Hildebrand did request, how is the revenue for July and August. For 2021, the arenas actually opened up 2 weeks later than it did last year. So right now we're about $139,000 of revenue for the 2 ice pads. So, and last year was about 180,000 for the 2 ice pads, but there was 2 additional weeks. I know that the director of cultural recreation can talk about it, but my understanding is that both ice pads are 12 hours a day, 7 days a week that they're booked for the summer. So I think we've done very well considering, we started a little bit later.
Thank you. Now I have 2 other questions on capital projects, and the treasurer and the public works director may want to comment. The first one is with regards to RD 1421, Sulphur Springs Road. Does the contractor have all the permits and has work started yet?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I can confirm that the contractor does have all the permits required to undertake the work. That was received right on the Friday before the long weekend. So we did receive those permits from the NEC as well as the NPCA, and we already have the Department of Fisheries and Oceans permit. So that is, in fact, in hand. The contractor has started working. They were able to complete the installation of some erosion control measures prior to the long weekend, and today are working on getting more sediment controls in place and getting ready to start excavation work on the roadway itself. They have applied for an extension to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans for that in-water working restriction, which expires on September 15th. So we're waiting to hear back from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans whether or not that extension will be granted or not.
My comment to you that they were working today, I was through there with my bike and I saw no staff, no working, no progress since my Saturday ride through there with my bike. So I was hoping for sure I would see the contractor and his workforce down there working, and the comment is they weren't there. Now going on with capital projects, one of the things I noticed with South Pelham construction was the fact that we had a collapse of the storm sewer on Vera, and so we made an emergency repair halfway down. When I looked at the budgets for the Vera, John Street, and Kunda Park area in Stella, I saw no budget item up to 2029 to deal with these storm sewers or any of the piping or any of the underground. And so where is the money going to come from when these storm sewers keep collapsing? Because obviously this pipe was completely rusted out and just completely collapsed, which means the rest of the pipe in the area, which is the same vintage, is going to have the same problem.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to answer that question, yes, there was a storm sewer section at Old CSP on Vera Street, which did collapse our way down from, well, almost close to the intersection of Stella and Vera. We replaced the storm sewer pipe under the Pelham Street contract as an extra down to past that break. We did not continue down to Stella Street at this point in time. There is no detailed design with respect to what the storm sewer and what that urbanization will look like on Stella Street. So we terminated past the break for now until that design can be complete and we can finish the connection of the storm sewer. With respect to the capital budget forecast, those projects were not included as part of our 20-year capital forecast. I can assure you that they have been reviewed and they will be coming to council for consideration as part of the capital forecast as part of the 2022 capital forecast or capital budget presentation. So we have identified that there are upgrades that need to be done on Stella Street, Vera, and John, especially with the new subdivisions that are proposed to come online. And so those will have to be budgeted for and will be included as part of our capital forecast.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Let's go down to next one is 2.14, update on Foss Road. I do have a question, comment, I guess more than anything for the Director of Public Works. Whoever gave us that estimate of 800,000 obviously hadn't reviewed the work that was done when the beautification of Fenwick took, because anybody who did that would know that when you're working on Fenwick in that area of the town, you are going to be into quicksand, dewatering, and what have you. So it is kind of disheartening to see that the budget went from 800,000 and we have to add on another 2.1 million on something that probably should have been should have known that it was going to be a hard task. I realize that some of that is for tunneling under the CP rail, but I don't think, I would imagine the vast majority of that money is for the dewatering and of the quicksand. And one other thing, if I may, and then I'd like you to, if you could comment on this, I'd appreciate that. I don't suppose we get any money at all from CP rail going through the town, and I don't imagine they give us any help at all when it comes to going under the roadbed. Comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So with respect to the Foss Road project specifically, you're right. There was prior approved budget in the amount of 800,000 for sanitary work and 500,000 for road restoration for a total of $1.3 million. When we were into the design phase and the geotechnical work was completed, you're right, 100%. There is the soils are fluid, shifting sandy soils with high water tables, which make construction very difficult. The majority of the increase in cost is associated with the work surrounding the CP rail. The requirements that are required for settlements when making those crossings are very tight and they're very stringent. The method that the engineer, based on the geotech work as part of the design process, the method that they're proposing to use on Foss Road is a underground, not very quiet method of installing the pipe. It's called microtunneling. It uses specialized equipment and contractors with basically pressurized water at the face of the excavation, and slowly advance your pipe with that method so that you don't cause settlements in the railway itself. That method is very conducive to soils that have poor stability and high water tables because it uses water as a method of excavation. So we're still in the design phase as well on that project. On the Church Street project, we have a different engineer that's looking at that one. They've done investigations, geotechnical work, and they're hoping to get be able to do that crossing with the jack and bore technique, which is more of a traditional method of crossing the CN or CP tracks. So that's where the additional costs come, and it was very late in the game with the design that we identified the additional costs. The original estimates for this work, I think, were approved back in 2019. The design has proceeded as such that we've identified these additional costs. Sorry for the long answer, but the short answer on the back end is that no, the town does not receive any contribution from the railway authorities for completing the works to cross their tracks.
Okay, thank you for that. And I guess I wish you well on getting the permits after the other project. Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Public Works, and it's referring to the same issue with Foss Street and Church Street. The reason we're updating or upgrading the piping is for future development. Am I right, or just?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, partially yes. If you recall, every budget presentation, I show a little pictorial which shows the issues that we have with our existing sanitary sewer system, and a lot of it is actually in very good condition. This being one of the areas where we have identified capacity issues as well as condition issues. So it is to replace existing infrastructure that needs to be repaired and replaced. But yes, it is also upsizing the pipe to be able to support the developments that are taking place in Fenwick.
Councillor Corr?
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Public Works. So could we not take some of the development reserves to offset some of this expense?
Director?
To you, Mr. Mayor, I may pass this over to the treasurer for comment.
Okay, Ms. Quinlan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have the DC study in front of me right now to see if it's a qualified project for that. The other thing you have to remember with the DC reserves right now, they're still low, and with an additional cost of $2.1 million that we're looking at, we would probably have to take out debt and to pay for that, because right now there's not enough money in that reserve. I mean, off the top, that reserve needs $1.6 million every year just to pay for the MCC debt. And then, to add the additional amounts coming out of there, that's going to be a bit tough. So we would have to check the report to see if it qualifies, if it's one of the projects on there that's, part of the DC revenue. And then what you have to do is look at the timing of how much money is in the reserve. And if there isn't money in the reserve, we're going to have to take out debt to fund that.
Councillor Corr?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the treasurer. Wouldn't it be in the best interest of developers to help support us by lending money? Or I'm just a simple businessman, but it would be in their best interest that this project moves forward.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, there are some municipalities that actually the developers upfront those costs, and then when the money's collected through the DC, then the town or the municipality pays the developer back. So those are options that we can look at if there's a large development that needs to happen and the town does not have the funds in their reserves, is to talk to the developers. Other municipalities have done that.
So the question is, will we be talking to the developers about that?
Well, we'll have to look at that as an option.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Hildebrand.
On the same subject, through you, Mr. Mayor, what bothers me about the engineering consultants report is we got the same rail line about 1 kilometer apart. We have two different consultants with two different approaches, and obviously one is hugely far more expensive than the other. Boy, that bothers me to no end. The other question I have is, why don't we wait for some grant opportunities? Obviously, these kind of projects, hopefully we can get some money from some of the governments somewhere along the line, because I don't know how we're gonna fund $2.1 million and the other $800,000 from both these projects at one time. To me, that's not an expense I'd want to incur.
Mr. CEO, perhaps any comment on that, on the possibility of funding, or perhaps the treasurer, whichever?
Well, look, politics is the art of the possible. I have been employed at other municipalities, specifically the City of London, that did historically borrow from developers to leapfrog municipal infrastructure out into what at the time were vacant fields and eventually became large developments. So that's certainly a thing we can and ought to look into. Councillor Cora is the exact principle correct. Development charges are supposed to pay for growth and are supposed to be usable. That's the basic concept behind them. And it may still be advantageous, or it may still make sense to take on debt relative to the DC reserve. For the reserve, it's a legal proposition, it's the town, for the reserve to borrow money to be paid back by future development charges. Really, that comes down to a culture and a comfort zone for any elected council, and around Ontario, that goes all over the map. I'm not sure where this council sits on that question. Certainly, there are things that can be explored by us. To answer Councillor Hildebrand, fundamentally, politics is the art of the possible. Mr. Marr's team have essentially identified greatly escalated costs, unfortunately, with these two projects, one more so than the other. And while it is correct that one is substantially more expensive than the other, ultimately, these are going to be hard decisions made by this council next year in the budget. There's a finite amount of money, not only money, but understanding we have a finite number of staff and a finite municipal capacity to engage in projects in any given year. If we had $40 million in the bank, we couldn't spend it all next year on projects. We can't handle that volume of construction. We're not staffed for that. We can't maintain control, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is sort of to raise the issue to you, to hear your general commentary and feedback, and for that to inform us as we as staff are working on the next year's budget. And we have a bunch of meetings coming in the very near future at the staff level before we bring you a document that is the starting point for your budget deliberations. So we're certainly interested in hearing all of your commentary. It will help guide us as we try to look at what can be done. But there is a realistic cap. We couldn't spend $40 million if we wanted to on construction. We're not capable of doing to that level. And we have a finite amount of money available for next year, and we have pressure on our reserves. All of those things are true. So we are going to have to make some tough choices. We're very, very interested in all of your commentary. I guess that's my point at the moment.
Great. Thank you, Mr. CAO. Any other comments or questions on 214? And Councillor Hahn.
Thank you, through the mayor. So I realize this is an update. We're not making decisions on this this evening, obviously, but the past two points that were brought up by my fellow councillors, I think, are super relevant. And looking for grant money, which I know our treasurer is awesome at. If there's an opportunity, I think that's where we need to go. We're biting off more than we can chew. We can't afford things, and we need to recognize that. Of course, Councillor Core brought an excellent point up, one of which that I brought up probably about 2 years ago and was called incompetent for doing so by the local tabloid. But nonetheless, and that is the development. And so I'm really pleased to hear about the development charges, and you very much hit the nail right on the head, Mr. Cribbs, in that certainly that should be something we'd be looking at as well, is the upfront charges and the ability to do that. So thank you for articulating that. That's something that I think that we should have been looking at for many projects along the way. So that's my 2 cents on this anyhow. I'm sure we'll get a report back to us before too awful long, and we will be able to make some decisions. But those are 2 areas where I'd like to look at either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Going down the list, see 2.15. Anyone want to comment, discuss that? If not, 2.16, execution of subdivision agreement, Saffron Meadows. I see Councillor Wink. Oh, you're on mute, sir.
Sorry for that. On the report, it shows phase 2 or figure 2, and it talks about parkland and 2 blocks for open space, but like, I'm sorry, I can't. I tried to expand this and can't really see the. It's not very legible. So just for curiosity, where in this subdivision is the open, or where the park is, and also the blocks for open space? I think I know where they are, but I just want that pointed out.
So, Councillor Wink, I got to remind you that we do not have a planner at tonight's meeting. Ms. Weens is on holidays. Mr. CAO, do you want to take a stab at that? I know you, go ahead.
Well, happily, there's a fellow here with an engineering degree who I hope is better at reading those plans than I am. I have been briefed. I can provide some general answers, but not as to the location of a park. That was not part of my briefing. So unfortunately, I failed the first test, but Mr. Marr is all sorts of competent. So.
Sorry, Jason, of course. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks for those comments. That's much appreciated. With respect to the location of the park, I don't know exactly where that would be in that area. So we can definitely respond back to council via email tomorrow. I did not do the engineering review myself. My staff undertook those reviews. They would be more in tune with where those facilities are located, and specifically with respect to this plan. And I would be happy to get that information together tomorrow morning and forward that to council.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wink. Councillor Corr?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff. I agree with Councillor Wink. It's very difficult reading these reports, especially maps. I just wondered if we could get these maps on one page so we don't have to get a magnifying glass to look at these reports. I had difficulties reviewing it myself.
Mr. CAO?
Very happy to take that under advisement, and if possible, we will do so.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So that, any other comments on 2.16? Not seeing any. 2.17, recommendation report, revision to draft plan of subdivision. Not seeing any. 2.18, information report, comprehensive zoning bylaw update. I guess if I could just a comment on that, Mr. CAO. I know this is, we've got a full-time staff member working on that, on this project, and it is coming, I believe it's later on in the fall. Any comments you wish? I know this is a big thing on our strategic plan was to get this done. Any comments on how it is progressing from your point of view?
Well, as I think you've identified correctly, Your Worship, the report's here as a status update to let you know that we haven't stopped working, and in fact, we're on. I think we're on pace. So the next steps will be finalizing mapping. Much to Councillor Corr's recent point, we'll try to get those to be able to print out on single pages wherever possible. And then we're going to bring you the bylaw together in one master document and circulate it to all of the approval agencies for their commentary. So it's got to go to NPCA, the region, and the Escarpment Commission, those three. And I think the Minister of the Environment, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not our planner. I think they also, at any rate, at least those three. But I also think the province for their commentary, so that'll be coming up, and then there'll be more public consultation in the fall. We're we had a good plan that council signed off on, and then of course this COVID bug that doesn't want to go away, and maybe fourth wave. We're not. So today, on behalf of the planning department, I can't promise you that we know exactly what that looks like. We want to do as much, obviously, give as many options as we can, both for people's comfort level and to maximize the chance of direct interaction with the public through various technologies, and hopefully some amount of in the flesh. We've certainly heard from some people who still prefer traditional meeting or meet and greet sort of formats. And to the extent the health rules allow, we will do some of that. At any rate, so I can't tell you exactly what the next round of public consultation looks like. We've been through a couple of rounds of that, but at the moment it's finalized mapping, and then get the draft documents out to the commentary agencies, and then after those comments are received, back to the public again, and then hopefully to council sometime in November.
Great, thank you. That was a stroke of genius, I thought, having that Tuesdays with Tara, and had the community members being able to get in touch with her personally and discuss how this new zoning bylaw, zoning plan was going to affect them personally. Any resident who wanted to phone up and get some feedback or get some meat and potatoes on this, they had every opportunity so far, and it's great to see we'll have other venues open for the public once we get further down the road. Great.
Your worship, we think we actually had more public consultation and more interaction than the region did with a whole bunch of its work on its official plan.
Wow.
So residents of Pelham are pretty engaged. Tuesdays with Tara was a success.
Yes.
As the report indicates.
Yep, great. Thank you for that. Any other comments on that? If not, we will go to 2.21 correspondence on the draft subdivision. Anyone there? Tim Henley's comments, single dwelling unit bylaw. Any comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Hildebrand, did you have a hand up? Yep.
Yes, on the Kunda Park Sterling Realty situation. I know I've been in correspondence with the Director of Planning, and the clerk has been involved as well. Maybe for the residents' benefit, someone could highlight what the next steps are.
I'll take a stab at that if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. CEO.
So I can't tell you that the staff report has started. I do know we are targeting to have one on the October 4th agenda. So you don't have a staff report here. You just have some you have some words on paper that are meant to be information for you, some from residents and some from a consultant hired by the developer. There's no decision point tonight. Those are all things that, of course, staff are supposed to take under advisement and think about as they write their report. So a report will give you some options and some input and some decision points. And we're targeting October 4th. So that's the next key step in the process, if you will.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, on the same subject. I was looking at option 2, and we have the same situation on Edward Avenue, where we have an emergency lane. The question I would like to know, and I know the chief, fire chief is not here today, how many times have we opened that on a yearly basis for emergency?
I got a feeling you got everyone stumped tonight, Councillor.
You do.
So we'll have to get the chief to send out an email.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question, Councillor. Any other questions on, I guess we are on 221. No, let's then 222, Tim Henley's comments on single dwelling unit bylaw. Don't see any hands. 223, Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism. Any comments on the grant there that we got? And don't see any. And then 224, Niagara Region, PDS 29-2021, Northwest Welland Secondary Plan. Any comments on that? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk. Does that have it? Nope, we keep going. 225, Niagara Region, 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Any comments, questions? Not seeing any. 226, Niagara Region Notice of Public Information, Pelham Elevated Tank, Municipal Class Environmental Assessment and Enhanced Conceptual Design. That's going to be an open house, Zoom. 227, the Water Quality Summary Report, and 228, NPCA meeting highlights. 229, NPCA advancing the use of native pollinator plants species to promote pollinator habitats. Any questions or comments on that? The only comment I'd like to make is that the Pelham Garden Club, I believe, had started a pollinator garden just west of the library 2, possibly 3 years ago. So they were ahead of their time. The garden's actually doing very well. 210, NPCA Compliance and Enforcement 2021 Second Quarter Statistics Report. Any comments or questions? Do not see. Madam Clerk, I believe that's the end of the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It certainly is. Unless council has any other comments, the vote begins with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our next item on the agenda, which is 11.4.1, and this is a council report from Councillor Hahn with respect to some, with the COPA 149 new flight training bursary at the NCDRA. To Councillor Hahn.
Thank you. Through the mayor to my council, I'm pleased to share some great news from our Niagara Central Dorothy Wrenchling Airport. Our local chapter of COPA 149, which is the Canadian Owners and Pilots Association, has just recently announced a new flight training bursary available to be awarded to an individual pursuing flight training at our airport. A generous donation from Pelham residents Ken and Bev Byberg, along with donations from members of the COPA 149, have made it possible to launch a bursary of $1,500 each year. The criteria for this $1,500 bursary and application can be found on our airport website, which is www.centralairport.ca. As well, COPA 149 would be pleased to accept donations towards this bursary from any interested individuals who would like to support flight training at the NCDRA. Donations towards this initiative at the airport can be made through COPA 149 and the town of Pelham. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, for bringing that to our attention. Well done. Any comments on this report? Questions? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that Council receive the verbal presentation from Councillor Hahn with respect to COPA 149 new flight training bursary at the NCDRA for information. And this vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next item on the agenda. And I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hahn. And it is be it resolved that Council receive Report 2021-0133 Clerk's Integrity Commissioner Update Report, and that Council directs staff to update the town's fees and charges bylaw to include an Integrity Commissioner complaint filing fee of $100 for infrequent complainants, 2 or fewer complainants filed per term of council, and $300 for frequent complainants, more than 2 complaints filed per term of council, and that council authorize an exemption to the said filing fees if the complaint relates to alleged physical or sexual harassment, any complaint relating to alleged criminal behavior, or any complaint filed by a Town of Pelham staff person, and that council authorize the full reimbursement of said filing fees if contravention of the Code of Conduct is found by the Integrity Commissioner, and that council authorize and grants the CAO, Town Solicitor, and Town Clerk with authority individually in their sole discretion to waive any of the said filing fees which they deem appropriate. And that council direct staff to present to council a revised policy S201-15 Code of Conduct Appendix 1 Complaint and Investigation Protocol to include provisions for 1. Integrity Commissioner complaint filing fees and exemptions. 2. That requests from members of council for advice from the Integrity Commissioner be drafted by the Town Solicitor, CAO, or Town Clerk according to the preference of the member. 3. Annual activity reports to include summary of advice given. 4. Council to receive final reports for matters the Integrity Commissioner deems to be frivolous, vexatious, or not made in good faith, or that there are no grounds or insufficient grounds for an investigation. And council, the member, and the complainant to receive the same final report from the Integrity Commissioner, requiring only one version of a final report. And that council directs staff to proceed with the town's request for proposals / procurement process to award Integrity Commissioner services for the Town of Pelham commencing April 1st, 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Lots there. Any comment, questions on this report? I see Councillor Olson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Reading through this, I'm not comfortable with charging our citizens anything for making a complaint. I don't. I think that puts a barrier between the citizens and the residents and council. I think there are certainly things that come up as are vexatious and frivolous, but I think if we really wanted to do something to change things, we would make some amendments to our code of conduct, which we can control. I also think that we have to be careful of the issue of confidentiality in everything we do, because this is meant to be an educational and guiding process, and not so much procedural court type thing. It's in this case, I think confidentiality has to take precedence over procedural fairness, I think. So I believe that we have to be careful in what we look for in reports. Summaries are fine, but there are things that some people may not want to have disclosed, and I certainly can think of a couple of things like estate matters that you might want to have the advice of the Integrity Commissioner, and I certainly don't think that's something that I would personally want to have in front of council, as even in the summary form. So those are my comments, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Kaur.
I fully agree with Councillor Olson. We shouldn't be charging our residents. If we uphold the oath of office, we shouldn't be we shouldn't get ourselves in trouble. And I fully agree with that statement he mentioned. The one question I have is number 2. Could someone explain to me what that really means? That if I wanted to file a code of conduct, do I have to go through the CAO or our solicitor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I believe the councillor is requesting clarification on seeking advice. Is that correct, Councillor Kaur? So the recommendation is that the council member who would like to receive advice from the Integrity Commissioner would consult the town solicitor, CAO, or town clerk, and ask that staff person help to draft the question of advice to the Integrity Commissioner. The purpose of that is just to ensure that the that there's a targeted, detailed question that is being asked, and it would also be a way for the town to understand and know when advice is being sought, because otherwise it doesn't come through the town clerk's office or the CAO or town solicitor. Unlike complaints that are filed, those do come through the town clerk's office, so we do know when a complaint is filed. However, with respect to advice being sought, we never have any idea. And so that was where that was coming. I don't know if the CAO has anything further he'd like to add to that explanation.
We're attempting to do a difficult balance, and as Councillor Olsen alluded to earlier, there's privacy on the one hand and procedural fairness on the other, and we hope this scratches the itches. But the reason why we try to set it up so that if you weren't comfortable with, letting me know the nature of the challenge or the issue, maybe you'd be comfortable going to the town's lawyer. And if you don't have if that working relationship isn't the ideal one for you, you could go to the clerk. But all three positions and then all three office holders have a good understanding of process and the conflict legislation, and I think are able to help distill appropriate questions, which should lead to reduced costs, and sort of focus those questions. So we were suggesting this only to try to help the taxpayer and to try to give you options so that you need not. I understand why you might not want to come to the CAO. I work for you and not the other way around, and don't want to specifically upend the balance of power in that relationship. So maybe you're more comfortable going to the town solicitor or whomever. We have three choices there. That was the logic behind our drafting of the item. If it is disagreeable to you, you certainly need not approve it.
Thank you. Councillor Corr?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So could we just say as an option? Because if we could get our own legal advice, then we don't need the other three people.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, Councillor Corr, what you're suggesting is in fact the default situation. You go directly to the Integrity Commissioner if you have a question, and that is legal advice you're receiving. That's the current situation. We thought this might be helpful, but if you disagree, very, very well. You need not add this into the suite of changes. We thought it might have some attraction because in all these things, we're trying to balance, reasonable cost versus access versus privacy versus procedural fairness. And I don't think there's a perfect answer anywhere. I hope there's a best answer for the town of Pelham.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't mean to offend Councillor Corr in any way, but I think his question was more to the point of getting his own outside legal advice as to what to do and how to draft his question to the Integrity Commissioner. Am I right, Councillor Corr?
Thank you very much, Councillor Stewart.
Oh, forgive me, I didn't understand that. My answer is you should not have to spend your own personal resources. You work almost for free as it is. Each of you earns less than minimum wage given the salary you are paid by the town. And I appreciate that you didn't get into this specifically for money, but you are not well compensated. Say that as a blanket statement. On top of that, I don't think, and of course, there are all sorts of people who end up holding the offices, and even amongst yourselves, there's a wider range in socioeconomic status and capacity to pay. But you should not have to pay hundreds of dollars for legal advice to help you do this job that you do almost for free to start with on behalf of the community. It really is appropriate that the advice to you be free, and there should never be any barrier to you getting the advice. Again, if you don't like this issue or this suggestion, don't endorse it. There's absolutely no rule or need or law saying you need to. We thought it might be helpful, and if we were wrong in that, I'm sorry. It'll be my error in judgment. Nevertheless, I don't think any of you should have to pay, and really, you already give a lot of your time for very little compensation.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. CAO. Any other comments or questions? My own comment would be that I don't think if someone is filing a first complaint with the Integrity Commissioner, I don't think it should be. But perhaps if it's under the second or third realm, then I'm not too sure that maybe there shouldn't be a cost. And if and it stipulates right here that if the complainant wins the decision, that they get the money back anyway. But if they don't win the decision, then they're out the money. I agree with Councillor Olson and Councillor Kaur. If it's a one-time thing, fine. But if it's ends up being a monthly or a bi-yearly event, then I think the citizen, whoever that citizen is, should have some skin in the game, and should have to put some money up front if it's just going to be a ridiculous complaint. That's my feelings. Anyway, any other comments on this issue? Not seeing any.
Your Worship?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I tend to agree with your analysis of the situation. I agree if it's a first-time type of event, but if it's a person who can constantly and continuously issues IC requests, I think they should have to pay some kind of a fee, especially if they're found to be no comment reports coming back to us. I think they have to have some responsibility and can't just go and do this for free on councillors just because. I'm not saying we have a code of conduct issue. I think we all adhere to the code of conduct. But the fact is, someone could just not like the answers we're providing, and that immediately brings up an issue. So I agree with your comments.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? And Madam Clerk, are we voting on this as one, or does anyone on council want to go separately? Can we do that? What's the decision here, Madam?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the motion on the floor is the entire motion. Having said that, any member of council most certainly can request to have the motion divided. And if they were to do that, we would go through each separate resolution. We'd break them up and we'd vote on each of them individually. Each of them individually would then be opened for an amendment. So for an example, I am hearing that there are some comments with respect to the fees to be charged. So if somebody were to request the motion be divided when we got to the fees, certainly that's open to an amendment and council can certainly amend that. And then we could do it individually, or certainly a member of council can just bring an amendment now to the entire motion. It's to council's wish.
Okay, so what does council wish to do here? Do you, we can either go all at once? Councillor Olson?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I would move to divide because I think we want to get to the final part, which is the request for proposals.
Okay.
I think we want to get to that for sure tonight.
Okay, thank you. Are you putting forth an amendment?
Yes, I move we divide.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? I see Councillor Kaur.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the motion is to divide. Therefore, I will begin with the first paragraph, which is, be it resolved that council, and I'm going to use Councillor Olson and Councillor Kaur throughout. Be it resolved that council receive report 2021-0133 Clerk's Integrity Commissioner update. So this is just to receive the report for information. Is there any comment, or can I start the vote?
I see no hands, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. And then the next would be, and that council directs staff to update the town's fees and charges bylaw to include an integrity commissioner complaint fee of $100 for infrequent complainants, 2 or fewer complaints filed per term of council, and 300 for frequent complaints, more than 2 complaints filed per term of council. Through you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Yes. Councillor Hildebrand, perhaps you might want to put forth an amendment on that?
Okay, I'll put forth an amendment that the first complaint by an individual has no cost, but further costs have charges associated with it.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that amendment? I see Councillor Wink. Thank you, councillors, for that. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just seeking some clarity. So I do understand that the amendment is that the first complaint would have no cost. As far as the second complaint, would that be the $100 fee or would that be the $300 fee?
That would be the $100 fee.
So the second complaint would be $100, and then the third and so on would be the $300.
Correct.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
Any discussion on this? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. And that council authorize an exemption to said filing fees if the complaint relates to alleged physical or sexual harassment, any complaint relating to alleged criminal behavior, or any complaint filed by a Town of Pelham staff person. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
A discussion on this item. I see none.
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. The next is, and that council authorize the full reimbursement of said filing fees if contravention of the Code of Conduct is found by the Integrity Commissioner. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Any discussion on this paragraph? I see none. Oh, no, I don't see any. Go ahead. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This begins with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that carries. And that council authorize and grants the CAO, town clerk, and town solicitor the authority, individually and in their sole discretion, to waive any of the filing fees in which they deem to be appropriate. To you, Mr. Mayor, for
Yep.
discussion.
Any comments, questions on this paragraph? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I do apologize for the amendment with the filing complaint fees. I did call the vote for the amendment, but not for the main motion as amended. And if I may, I'd like to do that now for procedural correctness.
Yes.
Thank you. And so this is for the main motion as amended. This would be the first complaint is for no cost, second complaint is 100, and additional complaints are 300. And that would begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. That does carry. So the next item is, and that council directs staff to present to council a revised policy S201-15 Code of Conduct, Appendix 1, Complaint and Investigation Protocol. There is 5 individual items. If I may call for each individual item. So the first item on that would be the Integrity Commissioner complaint filing fees and exemptions. So that's to amend the policy to include the Integrity Commissioner complaint filing fees and exemptions. And that, for any discussion?
Any discussion on that, council? Not seeing any?
And this will begin with Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Stewart,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. The second would be that, again, this is to amend the policy, that requests from members of council for advice from the Integrity Commissioner be drafted by the town solicitor, CAO, or town clerk according to the preference of the member. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. Any changes to this paragraph, council, or no comments? I don't know. Councillor Hahn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So back to our discussion. So what I'm reading here is that there's three options as we talked about. However, it also seems as though it could also be optional. Am I reading that as well or no? So it's, you have to choose one of those three individuals. Is that correct?
That would be correct, Councillor Hahn. It would be your choice to whom you wish to ask to have help sought to write that request of the Integrity Commissioner.
Thank you.
Mr. CAO?
If it helps you, the direction you're about to provide us is going to have us do more work and bring you back a report. So you're not actually approving that as final finished product. You're telling us to draft it containing these provisions. You're not passing those provisions just now. So you get a chance to change your mind or make alterations if you don't like what we propose as finished product.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, on that item number 2, can we add into that or legal counsel of the councillor's choice at their own expense?
Madam Clerk?
Sorry, I'm just writing this down, Mr. Mayor. If Councillor Stewart wishes to make an amendment, she certainly can. And the amendment, what I'm hearing is to add or legal counsel of the member's choice at their own expense. I'm not sure if if the CAO wishes to further speak on that. I do think he addressed the matter.
So as a point of law, each one of us, every Canadian can access a lawyer when they can afford to do so. And the lawyer, if they do work for them, for that purpose are one and the same as the client. So you don't actually need our permission, be it administrative or even town policy or bylaw to say that you can consult a lawyer and get legal advice. You do already have that capacity. The question is, are we prepared to use the work product of an outside legal counsel? And there, I will simply tell you that Ms. Sturton is a municipal lawyer and has been so for a very long time. I am a municipal lawyer and have been so for a very long time. And we have a level of knowledge and expertise that, with due respect to most of the external bar, they don't have because they haven't been working inside municipalities. There isn't a private sector bar with the same sort of, they have plenty of skills and knowledge that say we don't have, but there's a flip side to that coin. You have every right, you can add those words in. I'm hesitant to create a legacy that may create feelings of obligation or create a culture where you feel obligated to spend your own personal monies to do something that society and the province has very clearly said this community should be providing you with legal advice for free as you get to think about your own conflicts. And I just don't think you should do anything that saddles yourself with, so if some of you start getting private legal advice, the others will feel guilty for accessing something that you're supposed to, that Ontario has said you should be able to do. And I'm just hesitant to create a system whereby you feel obligated to do that. You should be able to access these services for $0. And if you really feel concerned, if you prefer not to have the clause, I would submit you should remove it rather than add those words. I think that's far preferable. And so don't come to to these 3 positions at all. If that's truly bothersome, don't do that. You don't need to. But don't create a system whereby, you or your successors might feel obligated to shell out $3.50 an hour for advice for something that Ontario has said you should get for free.
I understand what you're saying, but the dog just whacked the door. Depending on what the situation is and what the question is, sometimes this may never ever come to pass, but there is the possibility that depending what the issue is, that the councillor may not want to take it to either the CAO, the solicitor, or the clerk, and may want outside counsel to draft the complaint. I'm sure it probably won't ever happen, but I would just like that option open.
Okay, so go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Well, so there's 2 things, there are 2 streams. You can access the Integrity Commissioner. Do I have a conflict personally? You can also access it to file a complaint against one of your colleagues. So, and keeping in mind that staff and I are not subject to this code of conduct. So, because it's impossible to file a complaint against us in our personal or professional capacities. So that removes that barrier in asking for our assistance. With respect to the other, the logic of the system is that you're provided a certain amount of immunity. If you ask a question to the Integrity Commissioner, and even if he or she gives you the wrong answer, so long as you went through the effort of trying to inform yourself, you're given some protection. And I don't know if that's going to extend to a private sector lawyer you engage and you pay for advice that you pay for that might be tailored. So the logic of our system is that if you flag something as do I have a conflict, so long as you flag it and make inquiries, then you receive protections throughout. And you'll recall we passed an indemnification bylaw for elected officials. I can't tell you right now because I didn't know this was a possibility or coming. I think that would take, I think Ms. Sturton would have to do some legal research. I'm not sure I want to give a pure opinion in public anyway, but I think that would require some thought on our part as to whether or not you'd benefit from the coverage you'd think you might that you would otherwise.
I was thinking of it more as lodging a complaint, not just simply asking about a conflict. So, we can leave it stand the way it is and let the rest of council decide.
Okay. Any other comments on matters brought out by Councillor Stewart, or is the rest of council happy with that as it is? Now's the time to make a comment. And I see no hands. So, Madam Clerk.
Okay, thank you. So I do note that Councillor Stewart has withdrawn her amendment. That brings us back to the original. And just for clarity, I will read it back into the record that requests from members of council for advice from the Integrity Commissioner be drafted by the town solicitor, CAO, or town clerk according to the preference of the member. This vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. The next would be, again, this is to amend the policy that annual activities reports are to include summary of given advice. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Any comments, discussion on number 3 as read by the clerk? I see none, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. And this begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. For number 4, it is council to receive final reports on the matter the Integrity Commissioner deems to be frivolous, vexatious, or not made in good faith, or that there are no grounds or insufficient grounds for an investigation. To you, Mr. Mayor, for debate.
Okay, any discussion on number 4? I see Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO. I'm not sure why I would want to know, have final reports on things that are frivolous or vexatious or not made in good faith. I mean, I don't really know the value of that in terms of how I'm going to perform my duties on council, is to know what mistakes or what the errors are made by our complainants. I'm not sure about that one.
We're not sure either. This is clearly there in response to commentary I feel staff have received from you as a group over the past year. I would certainly submit you should read that over and consider that carefully.
Any other questions or comments on number 4 before we put it to the vote? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, this vote begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
And this does carry. For number 5, that is council, the member, and complainant to receive the same final report from the Integrity Commissioner, requiring only one version of a final report. Mr. Mayor, to you for discussion.
Okay, any comments or comments or questions on number 5? I see Councillor Olson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, go back to my first statement that the Integrity Commissioner process values privacy and confidentiality over procedural fairness, and I think that we only need a summary report, yes or no, from the Integrity Commissioner.
Thank you. And as far as the member and complainant to receive the same final report, you obviously are in favor of that?
Well, I'm not in favor of council receiving the same final report. I want them to receive I want us to receive the summary report.
Okay. Okay.
That's yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that's all I would have to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments or questions on number 5? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. And this vote would begin with Councillor Olson.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
That does carry. And that council directs staff to proceed with the town's request for proposal/procurement process to award Integrity Commissioner services for the town commencing April 1st, 2022. Mr. Mayor, to you for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. This is the last one. Any comments, questions on this last item? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and that does carry. Just one moment. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to our next item on the agenda, 11.5.2. And this is the Chief Administrative Officer Annual Performance Review. And I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2021-0134, Chief Administrative Officer Performance Review Policy, and that Council approve the Chief Administrative Officer Performance Review Policy number S600-14 and the associated CAO Performance Evaluation Review Form. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Questions, comments on this? And I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to make an amendment to that motion. That report 2021-0134, Chief Administrative Office Annual Performance Review be referred back to staff, and that staff provide council with multiple CAO performance evaluation policies and templates for council's consideration.
Okay, thank you. Have you got a seconder for that amendment? Okay, Councillor Hahn.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So that's a motion to refer back, and that would take precedence. So that would be what's on the floor from Councillor Hildebrandt and Councillor Hahn.
Okay, any discussion on the amendment? Go ahead, Councillor Hildebrandt, your amendment.
Through you. Number one, with regards to the policy, it refers to our Human Resources Department being involved in the evaluation of our CAO. I don't think it's a correct assignment of responsibility. Our HR department reports to our CAO, and I think that makes the evaluation part of the performance appraisal a very difficult situation. Talking to other municipalities that I work with, they use the region, for instance, as their part of the evaluation template. I'm not saying that we use them, but that's one comment. The other comment I have is this, with regards to the evaluation template. This council has recognized the need for an evaluation template, which forms part of the process to foster conversation between council and our CA to build foundational steps and core competence to help set clear goals for the success of our municipality. The template provided, from my past experience and obviously my preferences, does not reflect the template that would be my number one selection. And number one, I think we need one that's far more detailed to go over far more aspects, and that's why I brought forward this motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hahn, you seconded the motion. Any comments?
Through the mayor, yes, I think that there's an opportunity to have a more fulsome template. It speaks to peers as well as competencies, and I'm not seeing that, and I'd like the opportunity to review some other templates that are available. And I think that it is best practices and see what some of our neighboring municipalities and what's out there for best practices.
Okay, thank you. Rest of council, any comments, questions? I see Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I would support that because I think leadership is a core issue with, without leadership, we don't go anywhere, and it's a social and organizational imperative. And I'd like to see some element of that, and I don't quite see that in the template in front of us. And I think it's worthy of being considered because I think it's central to the whole issue of leadership in our town.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on the amendment? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just to be clear for council, this is considered a motion to refer back, not an amendment. So this would be referring this back to staff for the HR to bring back more tools for council's review. So this will begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Counselor Stewart,
Yes.
Counselor Wink,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our next item of business. I do have a motion put forth by Counselor Olson, seconded by Counselor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2021-0131, New Corporate Service Department Fees, and that Council approve the following Corporate Services Department fees effective October 1st, 2021, be included in the Town of Pelham User Fees and Charge bylaws. $40 for new role creation and $40 for ownership change, and that Council directs staff to amend the fees and charges bylaws to reflect these new fees. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, questions or comments on this item? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Stewart,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin,
Yes.
and that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our next item of business, which is 11.6, and this is a motion regarding Unflood Ontario. The mover was Councillor Olson, and seconder is Councillor Wink. Councillor Olson, would you like to read your motion into the record?
Let me have a look at it first, see how long it is here.
Alternatively, I'm always happy to read it in.
Well, that would please me, so thank you.
Thank you. Whereas the Town of Pelham Council has identified combating climate change by use of best practices and community education as a strategic priority. And whereas Unflood Ontario is an organization dedicated to using natural infrastructure to reduce flooding, lessening water pollution, and prepare Ontario for climate change. And whereas the Town of Pelham is affected by severe weather events, Great Lakes spills over effects, and urban runoffs. And whereas the Town of Pelham Council wishes to explore the potential opportunity of joining Unflood Ontario as a member and using natural infrastructure to reduce flooding, lessening water pollution, and preparing for climate change. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council directs staff to investigate the potential opportunity of joining Unflood Ontario as a member, the benefits related to said membership, and to report back to Council on September 20th, 2021. To you, Council, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. And Councillor Olson, do you want to speak on your motion?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. You've probably seen the ads on television from Unflood Ontario, and this is a group that was formed in the Golden Horseshoe and led by the Niagara Community Foundation, and it's to create greater awareness about make Ontario a world leader in natural infrastructure. What I'm seeking is a review of the possibility of us joining along with several municipalities in Niagara region and joining this group, because I think this has the capacity to educate people about the problems that we're going to encounter due to climate change and flooding and different things that we all don't want to see happen. So we would be joining a group of supporters, which include the City of Burlington, St. Catharines, Fort Erie, and for example, only Halton and Conservation Authorities, Walker Industries, and just give you an example of what the membership would be. And I believe something like this, a community organization like this, can be the impetus to create a greener society and a greener town and combat climate change. So that's why I propose this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Wink, you seconded the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, the only thing I would like to say on it, and I agree fully what Councillor Olson said, and you know, the ads on TV really make you think of what can be done to combat climate change and whatever. And I noticed that the new facility at Brock University for the 2020 games. The roof has been sodded. So there's examples in our area where they're moving to natural vegetation on roofs. The only concern that I have is this motion was delayed for one council meeting, and we've got report back to council by September 20th. I don't think that's realistic, and I would reach out to the CAO or SLT to find out what a decent timeline on that would be to get a report back.
Mr. CAO?
Well, as council is aware, I believe the town's climate adaptation specialist tendered her resignation some weeks back and is no longer on the payroll. We no longer have the dedicated staff resource on this topic. I have a staff member in mind who I think I'll assign this to tomorrow. I don't want to speak for his director, but they are busy working on the zoning bylaw for sure. So I would think I'd be prepared to say early November is reasonable. And if that's unacceptable to council, maybe late October is doable. I can tell you the next meeting, we already have a full agenda. We have 3 delegations. It will be at the page limit, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the one after that, by definition, will also be not small. We'll go with that.
So can they make an amendment to give you some wiggle room and say mid-November?
Could we go with Q4?
Well,
and best efforts?
Q4 starts in October, so you're getting to the end of December. Q4 is fine for me.
Okay.
We will aim for November.
Councillor Olson? Councillor Olson?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wink, for reminding me of that. I agree with what you picked there as the date. November is fine with me.
Thank you. I have noted Q4 as a replacement date, and that we do have a council meeting on November 15th, so we can target for then. I can just accept that as a friendly amendment unless there's any other discussion. Would council like me to call the vote?
Okay. Any other discussion on this amendment? I see Councillor Hahn. Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Stewart. I'm sorry. Councillor Stewart.
No, not discussion on the amendment, but my comments are, well, okay, I just realized that we do not currently have someone on climate change, but we will be rehiring for that position, Mr. Krebs?
Yes.
We believe so. There is a finite amount of time left in it. We're actually having that discussion tomorrow, and I don't want to publicly commit to that. It is a grant-funded position, and it has a limited time duration. So that's not clear.
Okay, thank you. But aside from that, I personally don't believe that we need to join an organization to do the things that we do know how to do. We're already doing things. The mayor alluded to the butterfly garden, which, helps with soil and provides for insects. The library is put in a garden. We have Public Works who have an arborist on staff, and they work in conjunction with the beautification committee to do those things. And as far as natural infrastructure, I remember at a meeting some time ago when we were talking about the parking issues at the community center, I suggested that when we're ready to move ahead with that we look at permeable solutions for parking. We have all of these things available to us without having to become members of some other group or form a committee or whatever. I don't believe that it's a necessary thing for us to deal with.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councillor. Any other, remember we have an amendment before us. Councillor Olson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, in investigating this, one of the things that conclusions that people have come to, and I'm talking about various things, various organizations like Trout Unlimited and the school boards, and that's the education of the citizens. And they've even suggested that we develop such a thing as a owner's manual for a property and a house. So education is the problem that most people see when it comes to addressing climate change, and the exchange of information that could come from this is tremendous, and it would be available to every single person in the community.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Olson. One more time, Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. An owner's manual for homeowners is a great idea. But that's something that we do have our community guide, which will be coming back, I assume, once we're past COVID. And that would be a great thing to include in it, you know, along with responsible garbage collection and pickup and all the things that homeowners can do to make their properties more environmentally friendly. So I don't believe we need to join another group and pay dues.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Stewart. Okay, we have an amendment before us. Any other comments on the amendment? If not, I'll have Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor, I'll make this quick. I know we've got some things we have to still get through, but yeah, as far as like and I think I articulated this a few meetings ago with regards to when our climate change coordinator did a presentation and the interaction you have with the emergency management department, right? So a lot of these things are, thunder. So a lot of these things, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in coordination between those two individuals. So I think that I'd be very curious, I guess, before I make any decisions on this, to know what's going to happen with or the climate change person, whether that's going to continue on or not, or where we're at, because Councillor Stewart has a lot of valid points, and that we do have a lot of initiatives that are already underway. And again, unless we have somebody who's going to work together with emergency management, joining another group, we should be looking at the things we said we were going to do, and that was to work with the climate change person and the chief. They were going to work together. So I think that's what needs to be done, and I think a lot of these things will be addressed by virtue of doing what we said we were already going to do. Thank you.
Okay. I just reiterate the fact that we're not going to know about the climate change person until tomorrow at the earliest, whereas tonight we are having a vote.
But is this not a vote, though, Mr. Mayor, just to have a report come back to us
Yes.
of whether benefit or not? This
Yes.
is an actual.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So on the anything else on the amendment? Okay, if not, then I'll have the clerk read. Perhaps you should read the amendment. No, just on the amendment, just on the date. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yes, it is on the date to have this returned back to council by the fourth quarter, and the target date would be for around November 15th. Okay. And unless there's any other discussion on this, it would begin with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
No.
Councillor Hahn?
No.
Councillor Hildebrandt?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
And the amendment does carry, so then we're on to the main motion as amended.
Any councillor have any questions, discussion on the motion as amended? Don't see any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This vote again begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
No.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
No.
Councillor Hildebrandt?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
And that does carry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to our next item on the agenda. which is presentation consideration of bylaws. Through you, Mr. Mayor, these are for the bylaws that were deferred from the August 23rd meeting only. The new bylaws for the September 7th, new bylaws will be after this. So this is a motion put forth by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration, the following bylaws do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, and that the mayor and clerk be and is hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. 1. 4368-2021, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136-1987 as amended with respect to second dwelling units in the Town of Pelham. Town of Pelham, file number AM-04-2020. 2. 4369-2021, being a bylaw to adopt an amendment to the official plan for the Town of Pelham planning area, amendment number 12, implementation of second dwelling units. Number 3. 4371-2021, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 4068-2019, confirming various appointments to boards, commissions, and committees of the Town of Pelham, and to remove and appoint members to the Pelham Beautification Committee, Schedule E, and to appoint members to the Pelham Seniors Advisory Committee, Schedule G, and to appoint members to the Pelham Public Art Committee, Schedule O. Number 4, 4372-2021, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of Rural Economic Development Right of Ontario grant program funding agreement between the Town of Pelham and Her Majesty the Queen of Ontario, as represented by the Minister of Agricultural, Food and Rural Affairs, to funding provided as follows: $15,000 for wayfind signage for the Rural Economic Development Program RED. 5. 4373-2021, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into a transfer agreement with Her Majesty the Queen right in the province of Ontario, as represented by the Minister of Infrastructure, for the province of Ontario for the purposes of implementation of the Investing in Canadian Infrastructure Program ICIP Community, Culture and Recreation Stream. 4373-2021, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an encroachment agreement for the lands located on 1471 Pelham Street, McGill Turpup Family Holdings, file number D16-01, 2021. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any discussion on any of these? And I see Councillor Hildebrand.
On item 11.7, item 3, I want to divide and separate the member of the Art Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Councillor Hildebrand has requested that item 3, that this motion be divided to consider item 3 separately.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if there's any other
requests on any of the remaining items? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Okay, this vote begins with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. So that brings us back to item number 3, which is 4371-2021. And that's the bylaw amending the various appointments to boards, commission, and committees for the Town of Pelham.
Okay, and discussion on this number 3. Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that the applications and the individuals that apply to come to committees, especially the committees that I'm involved with, I would like the opportunity as a councillor to review their application. I believe that the operation of the committee works exceptionally well when we're all cohesive and the application is reviewed by council. So I would like to see, like we did when we started on council, I would like to see the application and the qualifications.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions on this? So I have to, I want to make sure we got this. And to remove and appoint, so so Mr. CAO, don't we appoint these people? They come to, we put an ad out, they submit their resumes, and then council chooses it. We go in camera, we discuss, we come out, and then we make the choice in public. So what are you advocating then, Councillor? Can you explain that again, please?
I didn't realize that we're going to be going in camera with all the information on the individual to make the selection or approval.
Well, Mr. CAO, can you, why was this, what is this bylaw going to do as opposed to what we do now?
Sorry, if I might, I might be able to take the first crack at this.
I'm sorry, Madam Clerk.
No, not at all. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, you are correct. At the beginning of the council term, council does consider all applications in closed session and does vote on who will comprise the committees of the advisory committees of council. Having said that, when people provide their resignation and they've left, and then people have applied to come on, if there's no, if there's room to have that person appointed and there is a need on that committee, they come forward to council for direct appointment because there's no choosing. It's not as though there's one spot available and two people have applied. If two people have applied, then there would be a choice for council. This has historically been how the clerk's department has operated. If the committee needs a body, it could go on for direct appointment. Having said that, it is always council's wish and desire. If council wishes to refer this back to staff and staff bring forth the applications for council to consider in closed session and determine whether or not that individual will be appointed, that's certainly council's discretion.
Excellent. So just to reframe that, so it's halfway through our term, if someone leaves the Public Art Committee and they move away and someone else says, I would love to be on that committee, then right now they will just join the committee.
Certainly, they would make their application. We bring that to you for your approval, to what we call direct approval. Having said that, if there was only one spot on the art committee, for an example, and we received 3 applications, then we would bring it to council to make the decision between those 3, opposed to having this direct appointment. Having said that, staff is always happy to satisfy whatever method and process council wishes to undertake.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Hildebrand?
I deem the selection of committee members very, very valuable because when you're working on committees, the Arts Committee is one issue, but take, for instance, the Committee of Adjustment. If we're going to follow this policy, I just don't agree with it because the thing is, I think we as council need to make sure that the member that's being selected can work with the committee. I mean, committee works far better when we make sure they're qualified and they're actually applying for the right reason.
Okay, thank you. So then, yeah, okay. Any other questions or comments on this? I don't see the Committee of Adjustment on here, but would it be included on that, Madam Clerk? Would it have been, or is it just the committees that are here that you're trying to change?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just the committees that are referenced here are the ones in front of council for their consideration. So if I just look at this again, it's the Beautification Committee, the Pelham Seniors Advisory Committee, and it's the Public Art Committee. The last time we had a vacancy on the Committee of Adjustment, we received multiple applications, and therefore that appointment was dealt with council in closed session because it was a competition, if you will. The Committee of Adjustment is a committee that often gets multiple applications. So I would suspect in future, if we did have a vacancy, probably would come before council in closed session, as there would be a competition, if you will, for the only vacant spot. If that's helpful.
So Council Hildebrand, knowing that we're just more or less, we're just discussing these 3 here, the Beautification Advisory, Pelham Seniors Advisory, and the Art Committee, would you, and hearing what the clerk just said, that whenever there is a vacancy on the Committee of Adjustment. And I know when I was on council, we always did have probably 3 or 4 when to fill a vacancy. Would you be okay with what we're proposing here for these 3 committees?
Well, for the other committees, other than what I'm involved with, I have no problem with it. But for the committees I'm involved with, yes, I want to review that application.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So what I am hearing from Councillor Hildebrandt is it sounds to me as though he is fine with approving the others. Perhaps his motion is to strike and appoint members to the Pelham Art Committee Schedule O, and that those applications be brought forth to council at the next council meeting for consideration. I'm not sure if that's acceptable. Having said that, Mr. Mayor, I do see it's 9 o'clock, which is our curfew. So I would be looking for a motion from council to extend curfew.
Okay, so council, we need I see Councillor Wink. The motion, Councillor Wink, is time related or until we get done?
Till we get done.
Okay, and we are pretty close. Yes. Good. I need a seconder for that motion, please. See Councillor Kaur. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do have the motion is put forward by Councillor Wink and seconded by Councillor Kaur, and it is that the rules of procedure as contained in the Town of Pelham procedural bylaw be suspended, and that the specific meeting time curfew of 9 p.m. is hereby waived, and that the remainder of the business on the agenda for this meeting be continued until concluded. And this vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. My apologies, Mr. Mayor. So as I indicated, it sounds to me as though perhaps Councillor Hildebrandt is asking for an amendment to basically remove the appointment to the Public Art Committee and to have those brought back at a next following council meeting for consideration. Is that correct, Councillor Hildebrandt?
That's correct.
And so that would be a mover, and we would need a seconder on that.
Okay, a seconder. I see Councillor Stewart.
I'm not sure if council wishes to further discuss.
Oh, any discussion on this motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. So again, that would be approving all of the other appointments except for the appointment to the Public Art Committee, which will be brought forward to council's consideration at the next meeting. And that amendment would begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does pass, and therefore we would go back to the main motion as amended. And unless council has any other
Any other
discussion?
comments on the motion as amended? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. And that would begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the presentation and consideration of bylaws for the September 7th meeting. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, and that the mayor and clerk be and is hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. 1. 4378, 2021, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136, 1987, as amended by bylaw 4133, 2019, for lands located at the northwest corner of Port Robinson Road and Lamantie Drive, legally described as part of Thorold Township, Lot 166, Part 2 of Plan 59R13156, and Part 2 of Regulation to the Residential Multiple 1 RM2 295 Zone, Cortex Group, Inc., file number AM0221. 2. 4379, 2021, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of grant funding agreements between the Town of Pelham and Her Majesty the Queen in right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing related to funding provided as follows. I, up to $40,000 for the modernization grant phase 2 for the Town of Pelham web-based services review. 3, 4380-2021 being a bylaw to authorize an execution of grant funding agreements between the Town of Pelham and Her Majesty the Queen in right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing relating to funding provided as follows. I, up to $143,505,000 for the modernization grant phase 2 for the Town of Pelham Corporate Services Functional Review. Number 4, 4381-2021 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of grant funding agreements between the Town of Pelham and Her Majesty the Queen in right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing relating to funding provided as follows. I, up to $60,000 for the modernization grant phase for the Town of Pelham for the Lincoln Joint Public Library merger. 5, 4382-2021 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of grant funding agreements between the Town of Pelham and Her Majesty the Queen in right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing relating to funding provided as follows. I, up to $60,000 for the modernization grant phase 2 for the Town of Pelham Digital Human Resource Performance Management Review System. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any discussions on 1 to 5? Or we'll take them as a whole. Any comments or questions? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. That does bring us to our added item for tonight, which is item 14.1, and that would be the notice of motion from Councillor Hahn. To you, Councillor.
Thank you. Through the mayor to my fellow councillors, the Niagara Central Dorothy Brentling Airport is a valuable asset, and that is why this Pelham Council, along with Port Colborne, Wainfleet, and Welland councils, have all reaffirmed their support in maintaining and operating our airport. I am proud that the Airport Commission has put in the necessary work to have a vision for the future and a plan to increase income. We have a historic opportunity to provide services to a larger number of potential clients, and we want to take advantage of the increased demand for plane storage by building a hangar with 10 rental spaces. Providing a home to more planes will logically lead to an increase in fuel sales, from which the airport will also profit. These rental units at the hangar will be subject to taxation and therefore create additional future revenue for the Town of Pelham. I trust that Council will come together in support of what is clearly a realistic approach to growing the airport's revenue and utilization. This Council has recently been provided with the City of Welland report to Council, including the loan proposal and schedule. I look forward to the next Council meeting to put forth a motion of support for this revenue-generating proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. We look forward to receiving Councillor Hahn's motion and will be listed on the next upcoming agenda. That does bring us to our confirming bylaw, and I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and passed, being bylaw number 4384-2021, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of Council of the Town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 7th day of September. Through you, Mr. Mayor, this vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Any discussion on this? If not, Madam Clerk.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our adjournment. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of Council be adjourned until the next regular scheduled meeting, being September 20th, 2021 at 5:30. Mr. Mayor, to you for discussion.
Any discussion? I don't see any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, and it is 9:08. This begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. You may gavel out your meeting.
Good night, council, and congratulations.
Great meeting, guys. Thank you for
Congratulations,
finishing
council.
it.
We made it through.